And we are live. Welcome, everyone, to the Krisullis Podcast. I'm very excited about today's episode because this is a new series that I have been thinking about simply because I've been in the States for the last year, and there's been a lot going on, from the perspective of the current administration, how the market is evolving right now from a perspective of careers and jobs. And the Genesis series, that's what this is called, is focused on not just where things start, but how they're evolving. So I'd like to introduce our guest, Jill Manuel, to our show. Jill, would you like to say hi to everyone?
Hey, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm glad to have you. It's been a few years since we connected, Jill, and even though we've known one another maybe about 5 or 6 years now.
Yep.
Um,
2017, 2018. Yeah.
yeah, you're right. I thought it was I thought it felt meaningful to reconnect, and just listening to where you are right now really called me in and welcomed me to think about having you on board this series. You're telling me about strength, but you're such a strong woman, and I thought it's good because of where, like I said, where the market is at the moment. I think it's important for people to understand that they're not alone, and for people to know that regardless of where you are in your life and in your career, you can make changes, you can switch, you can adapt, and we have to be flexible in today's day and age. And your story is just like just the perfect expression of these goals. So I'd love to welcome you to first tell us where you are right now. Like, how would you describe what you're doing for the market right now?
So, what I'm doing right now is I have a consultancy where I focus on helping people communicate to audiences of today, meaning audiences where they are, and communicate in a way that makes them stand out as far as visibility, meaning that's how you attract business opportunities, or that's how you opportunities come your way. It's because you're visible and that you're establishing yourself as an expert in your field. So I help people become thought leaders, and I work with them, and I coach them, and in some cases I write for them.
Yeah.
And so I have that's one part of my practice. The other part of my practice is I'm still involved in media. So I had a almost 2.5 decade career in journalism. Most of that career was as a news leader. I ran newsrooms in Chicago, in Cleveland, Ohio, and in Sacramento, California. And so I've got a lot of experience running newsrooms and working with journalists. And so another piece of my business is, helping these media organizations reach that next generation of audiences. These audiences are not the same as they were 10 years ago. So it's important to understand where we are and how and where we go next.
Wonderful. And how did you get into media and just the area of news? What was that like for you?
Well, that was, this is, I kind of fell into this. I have a philosophy degree as an undergrad, and then I went to the Newhouse School of Public Communications and got a communications degree where I
Mm.
focused on radio, television, and film. I did not focus on journalism or news, but the first job I got out after I graduated was with Fox News. And so that was, in the early 90s. So that's how I started. I was a producer. I produced, and I grew to really love the business, and I just kept working my way up. I worked for Fox for a number of years, helped launch Fox News Channel in 1996 in New York City, and then I made the transition in 1999 to broadcast news in or local news in Chicago. So that's kind of how I got my trajectory. And then once I got to local news, I started as an executive producer, and then worked my way up to news director, and then and held that position in progressively bigger markets.
Yeah, it's so interesting how what you're doing right now is also part of storytelling, and also what you coach is around that. How has how has it been for you personally, um, being in these spaces? I know we talked about this offline, but if you're comfortable to share this as well, what's it been like for you? What have been some of the challenges and the life lessons that you've taken away from being in these, because these are big brands that you're talking about, and
Hmm.
you've used the word worked my way a couple of times in this right
Hmm.
now, and that says a lot. So what has it been like working your way into these roles?
Well, I realize, yeah, I have used that term a lot because that's what I did. I worked incredibly hard, and I was, really devoted to my craft, devoted to journalism, devoted to learning, devoted if I moved to a new market, you know, devoted to learning about that market, understanding what people needed there, what was important, and then also I became a devoted leadership student, understanding about what makes a good leader, how can you inspire, how can the definition of leadership is mobilizing others to act. How can you do that? And so, once because these are really hard jobs, and I've had as many as 100 people that were in my newsrooms, and so when you have that many people, and they're all so different, and they all need different things from you, and then also then you add the different generations that in my last role there were a lot of Gen Z millennials in my newsroom. So I became a student in how am I going to become the most effective leader that I can be. So it was 60, 70-hour weeks, really challenging, from a human capital perspective, but also from a just trying to inspire excellence in groups of people, to really love journalism the way I love journalism, and love the craft, and love the what the mission was. And I try to inspire that. But the truth is that not everybody did love it the way I did, but that didn't mean that it was less important to them. So that was like one of the biggest lessons I learned in my career, is just that you've got to find out what's important to the people that work for you, what makes them tick, and then you have to really tailor your leadership style to each person.
Mm. I'm sensing from what you're saying there is a great deal of listening and just create
Hmm.
space, for
Yeah.
people to feel okay to be themselves. And I did catch, I think, reading your through your profile, there is a sense of authenticity that
Hmm.
you stand for behind the verbiage of communication. And I wanted to ask you, like, have you been in spaces where you faced bad leadership, and why is because you're emphasizing leadership as
Hmm.
as a hallmark of driving or influencing the way the culture and the ethos is kind of fostered around the way people are inspired towards action. So
Right.
what does that mean for you? What does leadership mean? What is bad? Have you been in spaces with bad leadership, and what's that been like?
I think we've all worked for people that were not what we would like them to be And and you hear a lot of people talking about how, when they became a boss, they were that person that they weren't going to be the person that they had as a boss because they didn't respond well to that person. But I think like in any business, you get good and bad people. I think most people though just don't come in trying to do a bad job. I
Mm.
think that in the local news business, the middle managers get really squeezed because middle managers are the translator to between the vision of the top and then translating that into action steps for those who work for them. So I think that I always really just tried to understand kind of what their pressures were and how can I support them. What kinds of things can I do to be supportive? And because I really cared a lot, and I still care. I mean, I really cared a lot about the people that worked for me. I cared a lot about doing a really good job for the communities that we serve. The service element was very important to me, and really doing it in an authentic, trustworthy way, and in a way that that people could in the newsroom could understand and that they could buy into because ultimately as the leader you've got your vision and you want your people to understand what that is, and they also want to know what their place is in this vision. So I think that it's important just to also to really take a step back and when you think about all the leaders that you've had in your career, and I've had a lot, some good, some bad,
Yeah.
some I was learned from, some that were that weren't as good. But I think at the end of the day, I just tried to be true to myself and how I how could I best serve the people that worked for me.
You say this, and from what you're sharing, it also feels, and from my own cases, I'm reminded of how the inward intention
That's
setting of
right.
leaders is so critical even before like putting oneself out there. What's like that inner dialogue that leaders need to be working on within themselves. And I'm kind of, this is like a segue into the work that you're doing, because I feel
Right.
that the work that you're doing right now, and I'd love for you to elaborate on that, is very sacred, because it's more and it's beyond than just going into an office space, because this kind of translates everywhere. Because when we're doing this kind of reflection and thinking about our values, it's going to start to show up in other areas of our life. So tell us, how did was it like a pivot? How did you decide that from newsrooms to working with C-suite in boardrooms? What was that journey like for you?
Well, first of all, the biggest, I think, kind of part of the journey was letting go of that person who I thought I needed to be.
Mm,
And I think that when you have these leadership positions, you really want to be everything and be there for people and be there for the people that. But what I realized, I wasn't there for myself.
mm,
I wasn't there for me. I wasn't doing the things that for me to be the best possible person. That I thought if I just worked hard enough, the work would speak for itself, and I would get there. But once I got out of the newsroom and had more time to reflect, and I think that's a really big piece of the puzzle is
yeah,
taking that time to create space for yourself and reflect on how you're operating. I think I used the word in one of my posts. My operating system has really evolved and changed. So when I got out of news, and if I'm on the balcony of my life, I'm
mm,
looking at my life, I would say 80% of my life was all about work, and I had this identity it was who I was, and there wasn't really much else after that. I worked a lot, and that was kind of it. I had my family, and in some cases, because of the nature of the business, my family took a back seat
Yeah.
because it's breaking news. Oh my God, I gotta go. I mean, when stuff happens, you've got to react to it, or you've got to go in, or you've got to be on a conference call or online, or during COVID, you got to figure out how do you keep live TV going with people in their living rooms? Studios all over your town. So there's so much to it, and I took it so seriously.
Mm.
And of course, I should take it seriously because to me, I just want to do the best possible job. But and looking at the balcony in my life, I was not a well-rounded individual. I was not, I was just identifying with this job as opposed to, what did I really want? And what I really wanted was flexibility. I wanted to teach, I wanted to coach, I wanted to help other people. I love helping people, I love coaching them. I wanted to help them find their potential. And I wanted to get, but I also want to continue to tell stories. So when you talk about, the connection to what I'm currently doing, I'm telling stories. I'm using my newsroom experience and my newsroom structure to create mini newsrooms for every single client that I work for because they all have stories to tell. Everyone's got that thing that oh, that's no big deal because it comes naturally to you, or like all this knowledge I have about how newsrooms work, and journalism and storytelling and content creation. To me, that's just breathing. But for someone else, that could be a real revelation in how, maybe it's a next, discovery for them. So I realized that by sharing my journey and helping other people, then people can learn, and I can help them learn, but also I'm open to learning whatever it is I can.
Yeah. Yeah, we have, there's a wave of, and I know this is not a new thing, but I just say this in connection with AI and how it's kind of influencing the way businesses are choosing to
Yes,
define their goals, their direction, and operations as such. And you're really in those decision makers' heads with the kind of work that
right,
you're doing. And I think and I believe that apart from us establishing that communication is really at the heart of all of this, there's also so much more to it, like we're talking about reflection, pausing, understanding, is this really urgent, or is it just urgent in my mind? And
right.
what am I willing to give up in exchange for this sense of urgency that I have created? And I also have to add and embed, you spoke about this offline, and I'm bringing this in because we have several generations in the workplace right now. And it's
Right,
not like, maybe 10 years ago, things have changed so dramatically. So, given that you've worked in like these really large news rooms, shall I call them that?
sure, yeah.
Media
Hmm.
houses, and then now you're it feels like in a lot of ways you've gotten more intimate, you've gotten closer to that story of the people who are making these decisions as well. So what are you seeing with regards to how people see themselves with the work that you're doing, and what's the work that you're doing to help them see themselves better?
Well, that's a really insightful question because I think it gets to the heart of how people want to be seen, and and also what stories they are willing to tell themselves and tell, publicly, what kinds of things they're willing to say publicly.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I'm closer to myself than I was when I ran newsrooms, meaning I know myself better. And so I think that is a major factor in how I'm approaching everything now, because I know that, I know that everyone is on their own journey, and it's their unique journey, and that, and that it's really, it's where they are now, and all these things in their past, and, have contributed to that. But the reality is that, it what only the only thing that really happens is the right now.
Mm.
I think that's, a tenet that I'm really, I do a lot of reading about from the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius. I read the Meditations pretty much every day. I do a gratitude practice pretty much, every day. It's in my, I do a lot of writing every day, and what that's done is it's helped me focus on, the now, and being so grateful. So I think a lot of, when you look at stuff from a gratitude perspective, as opposed to, that you feel like you're under siege, I'm just looking at things from a different perspective. Sure, I was grateful, but I never really thought about it. I didn't have a gratitude practice. I didn't engage in any kind of reflection on what that looks like, because the reality is we all have so much to give, and so much, that's good, and, if you choose to look at things that way. So I think that that really helps me kind of navigate kind of this new space that I'm in, because I'm so open and willing to really work with someone to help them achieve what I'm just beginning to understand, which is, kind of this true self-realization, and how it is possible.
Mm. Do you think that the anchors that you're mentioning with regards to self reflection, stillness, and being able to nurture one's inner being in the ways that you're mentioning, journaling and, enriching oneself with good and high quality, good is subjective, but high quality, deep, readings are things that people who need it, like your clients, would benefit from as well? Are they things that you suggest?
I think so. I think everybody can benefit from it, but I think the one thing that I've learned is you've got to be in a position to receive that kind of information. And, when I first started the practice, of journaling and getting up. So whereas I used to wake up in the morning, I'd look at my phone first thing, and my phone would often have gone off. I get calls during the night. I would get, push alerts, news breaking emails. I had all these alerts on my phone. First thing I would do, I'd wake up, look at my phone, and like, oh my God, all this stuff's happening now. I took all push alerts off my phone. Um, I do not carry my phone. I use it for my alarm, and then I bring it and put it into, this is my office. I put it on my desk, and I don't pick it up until I'm done with my morning reading, my coffee, and then my writing. And I think the phones have become so, like, your cortisol will go, all you right, it's like the alarm bells are ringing. Oh my God, I've got this.
Yeah.
But you can control that, and you can, I read, Jeff Bezos does that, for, the first hour of his day. The guy who runs Amazon is not looking at his phone. And so I have really discovered that you can choose how you respond and what you're responding to. You don't have to pick your phone up right away. You
Yeah.
don't have to get on Facebook or whatever it is, LinkedIn, whatever it is that you're doing. So I think that, if there's an opportunity for me to share my experiences so that it helps somebody else that I'm working with, I will do that. But a lot of times people have to come to things like on their own, in their own time, because I think that, I wasn't ready to receive anything like that until, I got out of the news business and got into a space that was a lot less chaotic. But I think it's really been helpful, and I'm happy to help people on their transformational journey, because really you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Meaning, and what I and I tell people that I said, you are. I do a little bit of like coaching, and I hear from a lot of journalists who are unsure about whether they want to stay in the business or not. And because it's a tough time right now to work in news, and journalist trust is at 28% nationally in the United States, and it's a hard business to work in. And I hear from these journalists, and they want to know, they just don't know where to go next. And I remind them is that you can build the life that you want. You can do it. And I think a lot of times people don't think they can. There's always something, well, I can't do that. This is happening, that's happening. But the reality is you can.
Yes. With everything that's happening right now, you've just mentioned how there's this currency of trust, and whether it's journalism or politics or education, all of these systems seem to be dismantling, and not just in this country, but universally we're seeing a breaking down of these and dismantling of these systems, to where the current generation, the younger generation, is a lot more um, suspicious,
Oh, yes,
and
they are.
unwilling to be early adopters without fully understanding why they should ascribe to a certain philosophy, whether it is journalism, politics, religion, education. And quite frankly, I personally admire the strength that they come in with, because some of them don't have a lot of life experience per se, but the depth of sincerity reflects in the way they, maybe it's also innocence, I don't know, with which they ask these questions, like, why do I need to be doing that, or why is this important? And with the older generations, we just did, we just threw ourselves into like a 9 to 5 work and an education, or whatever our culture and our societies kind of shaped our paradigms. And given that this emerging set of leaders who are much much younger and probably a lot higher up the bar when it comes to, I wouldn't really say self awareness, but I would say there is a certain depth of awareness to where they want to know why, like what is the purpose behind it. And with these systems crumbling, and you're talking about, I imagine you're talking about older generations that also need to pivot. um,
Right.
so given this as information in the scope of this this conversation, what would be like, I don't know if this is the right word to use, what would be like the ideal client for you, given that all these things are happening? Do you choose your clients? Do they come to you? And who would that be?
Well, it's a combination of people, and I like to work with people that are collaborative
Mhm.
and that are open, and that really are authentic. And I think that because I think you hit it the nail on the head. With like Gen Z, for example. That authenticity is really really important. Transparency, authenticity, and so I like to work with people who really they're altruistic, who they really want to make a difference. They want to share what they know so that other they can help other people. I mean, I even work with I work with people in the wealth management field that I'm so impressed by their mission focus on
Mm.
helping people, and their why. And the story about, I have one client that her story about why she does what she does is really inspiring. And so those are the people I love to work with because they're open. They want to know about, what else can I do to be successful? And now, if you don't know about AI or haven't taken an AI class or don't understand the role of AI, that's something that you need to do. I mean, in order for you to continue and keeping pace, if you're still in the workforce, because it's going to become a skills based economy. It's not going to be your credentials. It's going to be, what do you know how to do? Because I think what you're going to see jobs shifting and changing based on the management of all this data that's being used in these AI agents, and there's just huge amounts of data that go, well, who's managing the data, and there's so many different ways to look at it. So I think that when you talk about, what's, transformation now, no matter what age you're at, I think you need to make sure that you're really understanding, kind of what does it mean to work in a world with AI, number one, but also, you got to always have that learner mindset, meaning that you're always learning. And so when you talk about my ideal client, that would be somebody who is just really wants to collaborate with me to get their voice heard, and who really wants to play a big part in that. Because sometimes you get people that they just are too busy. Executives are busy. They want you to, and that's cool. I love that too. But I love the clients that really want to really collaborate with you, learn from you, and you learn from them, and help them, become visible. Because I've met so many people that have so much power in them. And by power, I mean knowledge, and they're doing like these incredible things. But you wouldn't even know it because they're just not visible. You can't find them anywhere. They're not communicating what they know. And I think, it's kind of that old adage, Caroline, if a tree falls in the forest, does anyone hear it? Well, it's the same thing here. If your thought leadership is not visible and people can't access it, does it really exist?
I'm reminded of Deepak Chopra's book, Synchro Destiny.
Yes.
And you used the word power, and I could sense there was the need to create a distinction
Hmm.
within that, because there is a distinction. And he also very succinctly talks about authentic power and egoic power. And how, because I've also, I can speak to, and I can really relate to the fact that when I was with corporate in my last corporate job and I lost my job, I didn't know who I was, because that was my 150% identity. That was who I
Right.
was. And there was my whole world apart from my job had shattered within 3 days. Like, I lost my job, and there were a couple of other things that happened, and I was in pieces because I didn't know. I had fully identified with that, and I didn't know. And it was the best thing that happened, because the universe was like, get up, this is not you, get up. And and that's where I've got goosebumps right now, because I'm so reminded of how I had attenuated to that identity and thought that was my power, but it was not. And that gave me room, that clearance gave me room to sit with myself. And it was really messy, and start to understand what my authentic power, which is connected to source or spirit or whatever people would like to call it, is. And how do I recall that back, because it's there, but we forget. And I say all of that because I also picked up on what you just shared with regards to people having something inside of them. And with this whole emergence of technology, and how we're in a space where roles are being displaced, people are being, there's a higher demand for integration of technology
Right.
with specific roles, but also there's a going away of other roles. and what does that mean from a humanistic perspective? Like, who are we in this current phase and timeline? And also, what are the stories that we're telling ourselves and telling the world? And that's kind of a part of your work, the
Yes.
storytelling, right?
Yep.
So, as we're kind of closing in on this chat, and understanding this whole sense of authentic power, and being able to remember who we are, having these practices, getting really honest within ourselves about, because there are things we know, but there's a lot that we don't know. And also being able to tell our story from the inside out, which is so much
Right.
powerful. um, uh, I know that communication, because it's a very large, broad word, but storytelling, from even from this conversation, I understand, is so much more than just communication, because and it reflects through everything. Um, so with the current space and people who are going to be watching, and we've had a few people chime in, but we'll have a few more, regardless of where people are, because that's what I kind of sense from what you were saying. What's the most important, or what are those important messages that you would like to let people know with regards to the present moment, their story? What's the takeaway that you would like to share today?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway in storytelling is your story is unique. No one has your story. And if you don't think you have anything to say, you're wrong, because everyone has their own unique, way of presenting to the world.
Mm,
So, if you're feeling like, well, I can't do this or I can't do that. Well, you've got your own unique story to tell. And how you find that story is you find it through, self-exploration, I think. And you find it through, kind of, connecting, human connection is, I think, where you get that, you get the story, and you get the confidence to tell your story. I think a lot of this is confidence. Well, wait a second, I don't have anything to say. Everyone's got something to say. So that's number one. The second thing is, I just want to say that, you Caroline, you talked about your journey and how it was, you had this huge upheaval. All this stuff was happening to you at one time. There is nothing that happens that doesn't go through, this, that doesn't go through, like, you know, anything good. You have to kind of go through. I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary 20 Feet from Stardom, but they talk about, it's about backup singers and how hard it is to be a backup singer. They talk about the wood shedding, meaning you got to go through, all the bad stuff in order to really understand the good stuff, and
that's
to really like arrive at a place. So it's kind of like, and so many people are afraid to go through the bad stuff, so afraid to go through, sort of, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not perfect, I'm not who people think I am, or whatever it is. But the reality is that, if you can go through that process, when you come out into the other side, then you're in a completely different place. Like, I'm in a completely different place than I was. If you had talked to me 2 years ago, I would have been in a completely different spot. But because I chose to use my time to understand where I was, it didn't feel great all the time. But what it did do, though, I just kept working at it steadily. And then after a while, it's like I started lap swimming, and I had never, really been a big swimmer. I mean, I knew how to swim, but I started to lap swim, and when I first started, I couldn't even go the length of the pool. But then I kept at it, as building the habits, and I
Mhm.
kept at it and kept at it. And then, now I like, I'm a, good lap swimmer, and I get a lot of exercise, and I'm getting proficient. but nothing ever happens without doing the work.
Yeah.
So that would, I guess, be the second thing. So the first thing is you have your own unique voice, that you should use it. And secondly is that don't be afraid of, kind of doing the work, even in when you feel crappy, because that's just part of the process.
Yes. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Wow. I know that I could go on asking you because we are, this is so layered and there's a lot unraveling. And I'm reminded of this picture. There was this picture of a statue of a woman, and the upper portion of her body is all chiseled, and she has this hammer, this chisel, and the lower portion is a much bigger, broader, and she's just chipping away, and that's like, again, I have goosebumps just thinking about the profundity of that picture, because of what you just said. Just keep at it. There are days that we will feel crappy and shitty and feel like, why am I doing this? And I did mention this on our call the last time. Michael Bernard Beckwith talks about how the practices that you have mentioned, and he also talks about like meditation, prayer, and journaling and things like that. Regardless of what's happening in the day, or regardless of how we feel, our feelings should never direct the discipline behind these practices. And
Right.
so
I agree.
we tap into a state, you know an emotional state, which is not feelings, it's a state of consciousness, regardless of what's happening. And then we get the clarity, we get the intention, we get the drive. All of these things come from an unseen resource inside of us, but we have to, like you said, put in the work every day.
Right.
That tiny bit of work, and it does pay off. It does pay off.
Consistent. It's got to be consistent, and
Absolutely.
you can't just do it, whatever it is, and it can be anything. I mean, I'm just sharing the things
Yes.
I've done, but whatever it is that helps you, kind of really be grateful, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
because there's so many different ways you can go about doing this. Like I use guided journals to write, that every day I'm guided in my journey. You know but whatever it is, you got to do it consistently, because otherwise it's just like anything else, it's not going to pay off.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, how can people find you?
Well, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn, and on my, I have a company page. My company is JCat Group. And you can email me if you want it, Jill at JCAT Group, JCAT Group. That's Jill. That's me. My daughter's Catalina. That's where I came up with JCAT Group. And you can direct message me on LinkedIn. I'm at Jill Ann Manuel on LinkedIn, and you can find me there. And you can get a real taste for the kinds of things I'm writing about. I'm writing about, primarily in the thought leadership arena, and also in the future TV arena. And there's been some wonderful conversations that have happened in the comment section of LinkedIn. And if you're and I think that LinkedIn is really, it's a fantastic thought leadership platform, and it's also a way to really become visible.
Yeah.
And so that's how Caroline and I met originally, was through LinkedIn, and that's how we reconnected. So it's a powerful thought leadership platform, and that's the best way to reach me.
Wonderful. I will also drop that. I will tag you because our
Okay,
newsletter is coming out today, and I was waiting for our episode in order to update it on
great.
LinkedIn, and I will tag you there. I want
Thank
to
you.
thank you for just the reverence with which you've shown up today, and talked about who you are in this mix of the madness that's happening in the world, and how you're choosing to serve and support others who also want to be likewise and do likewise. and probably don't know where to begin, don't know how to find themselves, or just need to tell their story. And just for being in this co-creative space of nurturing, I've really felt it on today's episode. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure.
And for everyone watching in, or those who will watch in, be sure to watch out for our next episode. Thank you for being on this journey, the Krisullis Podcast, the Genesis series with us. Until next time, see you all soon. Bye bye.